Are the stories you're telling yourself moving you further or closer to who you want to be? Do you use the elements that should make you more resilient to make you a victim? Or are you using those same elements to inspire you forward, both in the knowledge of yourself and in your pursuit of your goals? How you tell the story matters. And in this episode, I get to speak to someone who's lived through some interesting things and tells himself supportive stories that are not necessarily happy, but supportive in order to move himself forward. I'm speaking with Sufian Chowdhury, who is a serial entrepreneur whose passion lies in improving the healthcare industry through innovative technology. He is the founder and CEO of Kinetic, a venture-backed startup based out of New York City. They develop API and platform solutions that connect key stakeholders in the NEMT. I don't know, it's not my industry, but in that industry. I think that he told me this is his fourth business and he's experienced having in his bank account anywhere from $40 to 9 figures. So this individual knows a little bit about how to tell supportive stories to reach your goals. So whether you are an entrepreneur with $40 in your bank account or an entrepreneur with 9 figures in your bank account, this episode is for you to learn how to tell stories that help you be more resilient, that help you discover how you should be operating in the world, and more importantly, discovering how you can be of service to yourself and others. All right, let's go.
Welcome to the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast with Alea Harris. If you're looking for actionable ways to overcome communication and differentiation challenges by sharing radically authentic stories, you are in the right place. Listen in and learn how to stand in the power of your unique narrative to transform your personal life, business, and workplace culture. And now, your host, award-winning international speaker, strategic storytelling consultant, and Japanese whiskey lover, Ruby Coral's mom, Alea Harris.
Hey there, Sufian. Thank you for joining me here on the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Alea.
It is my perfect pleasure to have you here today. Before we get started on this episode, which I can already tell is going to be one of my favorites, I'm speaking that into existence, and I don't think that God's going to have a hard time manifesting that one. Tell the people about yourself in a couple of sentences.
My name is Sufian, and I'm an aspiring entrepreneur, and I love solving problems. I don't think I'm an aspiring. I am an entrepreneur, but
I was going to say, don't you already?
Yeah, this is my fourth. Yeah, this is my fourth one. So, I just love. I love solving problems. I love being challenged to do things that haven't happened yet. And I love people and helping people.
What are some of the challenges that your businesses have solved so far?
Well, I've primarily been in ed tech, education technology, or health tech. But health tech I've been in for about 10 years now. And it's very, very challenging. The bureaucracy is insane. To bring something into life in such a bureaucratic marketplace, it's very challenging, but very rewarding once you're able to do it.
So you chose that life, Sufian. Nobody told you to do this. Nobody told you, you know what? You should go be an entrepreneur in that environment. So what made you choose the challenge?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I was oblivious to what I was doing. That's for everything, right? I think when I started this company, I had no intention of getting it to where it is today. It wasn't even my primary focus. I was working on another startup. But then as I was working on this more and more, I realized how important it was for me to focus fully on this and my full efforts on it. So I dropped all the other different, projects that I was working on and started focusing on this about 6 years ago. And since then, it's grown beyond my own imagination.
That's always wonderful.
It's been it's been an incredibly fun ride, and we're just getting started. And I can't wait to kind of go through all this stuff with you today.
Me too. I'm thoroughly excited about it. So when people want to make money, you got options, right? You could steal it, which is not the way that I recommend going about it. But, people do.
A lot of people do.
People do. You can inherit it, which is not really an option. If it were, I would have chosen that option.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I don't think I would, though. I don't think I would inherit money.
I would inherit and then go and do like things that like I'd go give it away, like the Vanderbilt family, right? They inherited a grip of money. They don't have a business as a family, and their business is philanthropy. Like, I think that's what I would do.
Yeah.
But, I don't have that particular option. Or you can go get a job.
Yep.
Which is, people say, the safest route, but I've been laid off twice. So I don't feel like that was the safest route.
Good point. And I don't think it's the safest route. It depends on what safety is. If it's money, then not really, because even in the U.S., no matter what you say about its social welfare program, they still, my philosophy about entrepreneurship is that in a country like the U.S., it's no matter how risky it is, at the end of the day, you'll still have public housing, government insurance, et cetera, et cetera. You go to 90% of the countries out there, you don't have none of that stuff. So being an entrepreneur in those countries is risky. Being in America, you're playing with house money. So yeah, that's my take on it.
I love that. You might not want to live in government housing, but you could.
But you could. Worst case scenario, you're going to have housing and food. And I think, that's what made me jump. I just didn't care about the risks associated with it. You got to be risk averse. I think going into just a traditional job, for me, the reason I didn't do it, first, I think I'm unemployable. I tried it, and it's just not for me. I want to be a free person. I'm a free thinker, and I want to bring stuff to life. And oftentimes when you're at a job, no matter what it is, whether it's in consulting or finance or whatever, it doesn't matter. You are limited severely in terms of what your potential is and the pain associated with going and working and not being respected for the work you do. I mean, it's really the common problem for the average person that has a 9 to 5. It's very tough. You never hear somebody saying, yes, I have been rewarded for the job I did, because inherently in capitalism, the employer must make more money than those they employ. And so that fundamentally will never make you happy. And so that for me is like never going to happen.
Never going to happen. You decided on the other option, which is entrepreneurship. And you've decided on it like multiple times, like you're in it. It's a thing.
I'm done. Yeah, this is it forever. Like till the day I die, I'll be building stuff. Yeah.
And I can appreciate that, but most people would look at you and think that you're a little wacky. They look at look at entrepreneurs and think that they're wacky.
Yeah, I know. I am. And I embrace it. But it's that for me, I think it really depends on how you look at life and what your goal is to achieve in life. And I think too often we break our life down into these like 1-year plans, and life is not a 1-year plan. Life is it's just the entire your entire life. That's one big plan. And so if you look at it as a 20, 30-year thing, then you'd plan differently than you would if you had to make money today or within a year and things of that sort. So for me, that's how I look at it. I think just planning long term, it just didn't make any sense to me to get a corporate job and take it 1 year at a time.
Yeah, I could understand that. But I still want to know the moment. Can you think, was there one moment where you were like, no, I'm an entrepreneur? Was there a breaking point? Was there a conflict that started this? Or were you just like, I'm 3 years old and here I go?
I think for me, I grew up in Jamaica, Queens. It was hustler's haven.
Some of them were doing option number one of making money.
Yeah, and they were trading other commodities.
Yes, exactly.
But I grew up in a world that was around, for me, the world that was around me, I think I became immune to risk and not being in safe places because I grew up in one of the craziest neighborhoods in America in the 90s. So for me, I think inherently I forgot about, I thought that's how everybody lived until you grow older and you go to nicer neighborhoods and you're like, oh man, I had a pretty traumatic childhood.
You're like, I should probably get some therapy actually.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. And
not
then
normal.
this is not normal. And so I think for me, that's growing up in that world. And I remember I was in sixth grade. The first thing I've ever done was sold T-shirts with names on it. I didn't know it was gang names, but I was selling it. I was like 11 years old. My brother he's an artist, and so he had this Epson printer, and I'd print out these names. I'd iron the names on the shirts, and I'd sell it. And I'd buy these Hanes shirts for $5 and sell each shirt for $5, and take the money and buy candy with it. So like that's just what I did. And the first client that I ever had in sixth grade, so funny, he's the head of operations at Kinetic today.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
20 years
later. A really good T-shirt.
No, but I think he still has it, which I'm going to make him bring to one of the company parties. But it's hilarious. So, and then in high school, I was selling sneakers. I was buying sneakers and selling them. So I was flipping that. In college, I was doing that with papers, right, for thesis and stuff. And so I just got, it is what it is. Right? Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, whatever. But it's all gone. It's past the statute of
limitations, right? Everyone has disagrees. We're fine. We're not dropping any names. I want to go back to what you said about some of the not okay things and how you realized they were not okay. Can you think of a couple of those, and what are they specifically, and how they have shaped how you move through your role in life as an entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, I think, I grew up in a nuclear family where I had the luxury of having both parents there, and my father was like a military man, so he made sure like I was very disciplined. And I remember growing up in middle school, I mean, it was gangs everywhere, right? You had Bloods and Crips and Latin Kings. It was just crazy. And the only way for me to not get involved in any of that, because you naturally get caught up in this world, and was sports. So I started playing basketball. And I couldn't just be mediocre. I had to be very, very good so I could make the team and I could stay out of trouble, right? And so that was the strive to be the very best at whatever I chose to do, to avoid this world that I didn't want to be a part of. And naturally, that evolved into the business world, where whenever I did anything in the business world, I wanted to be the very best at it. Otherwise, I won't do it. So just getting that feel for it, knowing that that's not going to happen, growing up in a nuclear family where I was taught not to even touch that, or you're going to get killed at home. Even if you don't get killed outside, you're going to get killed at home. I think those were the guardrails that were so important. At that time, I didn't like it, but those guardrails helped me kind of get away from that stuff.
Well, that is a story of, it's actually a very similar story to my husband. He grew up in the jungles in LA, and now he has his doctorate degree and works at a university. So it's very, very, very similar.
Yeah.
But that's a story of avoiding something bad, going towards something good to avoid something bad. And you're saying that you use that now inside of how you are an entrepreneur to move and push yourself forward. So what are the stakes now? What are you avoiding now? What bad thing would happen to you in your story if you didn't continue to push yourself forward? Because we already talked about there's government housing, right? But it's not, that's not a realistic option for you. What is the stakes for you?
No, first, because you know too much in regards to what's possible in life, right? I think the stakes are that it takes a lot of things to fall into place for you to be successful as an entrepreneur. I think I'm incredibly lucky, incredibly fortunate to have done this several times. And now with the company, it's scaling to be very, very big. And, we could exit in a 9 figures, 10 figures, this company at some point. So it's
congratulations. And always remember, podcast host accept all gifts. Thank you. Thank you.
I will send something over to you. But, for me to be right now where I am and kind of, I do reflect a lot on my life. It becomes an obligation to continue building stuff. You need a lot of skills, but you need to know a lot of people. You need to have accomplished a lot to be able to convince investors to continue to pump money into the deals that you're working on and to the ideas. And so I feel like it's now an obligation to continue to build because I know what I can create. I know the team that I have, and I know the impact that I could have on society. And it's become a very personal journey for me. I didn't grow up with much, in terms of money, but grew up with a lot of love. I have 5 incredible sisters. So,
wow. So there's 6 of you?
There's 7 of us. I have another brother, so it's 7 of us.
I just want, if your mama listens to this, mama, rock on, girl. I have one daughter. She's 14 months. One. And I'm like, I don't understand how anybody has siblings. And this woman did this 7 times?
Yeah, 7 times. I don't know why, but
I don't know why.
But I'm glad she did because every single one of my siblings played a pivotal role in me becoming who I am and getting to where I am today. So I'm very fortunate. So it's a very personal journey, and knowing how much you could give back, knowing how you could impact it. I think for me, beyond Kinetic, there are a lot of folks that I mentor and guide, and they're just, but when I started this about 13, 14 years ago, I had a mentor of mine who would help me and so relentless in her efforts to help me. And I'd be like, what's in it for you? Because for me, I grew up in a place where it was all transactional, right? I do this for you, you do this for me. And she didn't want anything in return. And she said, here's what I need from you. One day you'll be very successful and people will come to you. And you're going to give everything you've got to them. And they're going to ask you the same thing. And they're going to say, what's in it for you? What do you want? And you're going to say to them, well, one day you're going to be very successful. And I want you to do the same for others. And she said to me, this is how we're going to change the world. And so these are the things that, you keep in the back of your mind, no matter how busy you get, that you've got to, you're in a very fortunate state to be able to help others, to continue doing this. And I just want to do cool stuff. I want to build stuff. I want to take on the challenges that the world has. And and I love it. I just love it.
So if I'm cobbling together your story here in a framework, we have you, the hero of the story. Your cape is in the mail. We have you, the hero of the story, and the problems that you're overcoming in the very beginning were, I, gotta basically not be recruited into a gang, so I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
I might skate along the edge of legality in some of my ventures, but then I will figure it out and become an entrepreneur, a successful legal entrepreneur, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then you actually have articulated having the power of a guide, because saying you're a self-made millionaire, bazillionaire, dozenaire is not a thing. No one gets anywhere alone. So you had someone guide you along your journey. The part that I want to know now is, what is the plan that either they, your mentor, guide, gave you to lead you to be where you are now? Or what is the plan that you have figured out for yourself to take you from right on the edge of hoodlumdry to successful multi-comma entrepreneur?
Right. So I think a couple of things. There are 2 types of mentors, ones that talk to you, ones that don't. The ones that don't are authors of books, so you ought to read a lot. Because reading books have bridged my knowledge gap in a way that nothing else could have. So I highly encourage everybody to read books, find really good authors, and just read and take what they're saying and apply it to the real world, and it's going to change your life. Second, it's living, breathing mentors who talk to you and communicate with you. And I've been fortunate enough to have probably a dozen of them over the last 10 or 12 years. Every single one of them played a critical role in my career. And the cool thing about the underlying factor is they're very giving. They're very giving people who've accomplished a lot in their own life, and today they're in a position to help others. So they're very, very giving. They don't want really much in return. And the way they guide you isn't necessarily saying, hey, here's the plan, execute. because they know that's not their place to say that. What their place is to just say, how do you feel about it? Why are you doing this? And do you, if you don't want to do it, do something else. So they're like a therapist that listens to you and talks to you. It's similar to that, but with no real financial transaction right then and there. But they guide you, they give you guardrails. And if they strongly believe that you shouldn't do something, they'll tell you like, hey, this is compromising your values. And so things like that. You constantly need folks. And then when you want to give up, I mean, building a company is very, very tough. This company, I've been going at it for 7 years. We've raised substantial capital. And last year in 2023 was a very difficult year to raise capital. And, I'd get a call from different folks almost every day to say, hey, you got to keep going. This is, you can't give up. And so that's what they do. They guide you. They don't let you give up. They don't give you a business plan. That's your job to figure it out, right? What they do is give you the emotional and mental support that's needed to grow in your career.
So they don't give you a plan. They don't give you a business plan or any types of steps. But what have you gleaned as the steps that you've developed on how to move forward in your own story?
Yeah, you got to be very comfortable with failing and fail quickly. A lot of times people see failure as this never-ending perpetual state. And I think it starts with school. I think school's got to teach folks that it's okay to fail, because failure is the fastest way to learn when it happens to you personally. And every time you fail, it creates a guardrail for you. You know not to do that because the outcome is failure. So you in order for you to know what you need to do, you need to go through many iterations of all the things you cannot do. And so failure teaches you that. So go after anything and everything, and you'll become very successful if you don't accept failure as the state, and if you just see it more as an omen or as a lesson to not do it again. And you keep going, but don't repeat those mistakes. And that's how you could quickly become very, very successful in anything you do. Become very comfortable with failure, because it's not a state of being, it's rather a guardrail that guides you to becoming successful.
That's a very good perspective. It's very prevalent in the tech world. I was a Google vendor partner, and it was fail fast, fail fast, fail fast all the time when we were doing work. That's very cute, talking at such a high level. I'd want to know a story. Tell me a story about your failure.
What story do you?
Pick a juicy one, like not one like, I tried to raise $1 million and I only got 900,000. Like, no, I don't want that story. Tell me a story of failure that you really truly that you used to rise above.
I mean, there are endless failures. I mean, okay, I'll tell you this. I hated school. I hated school so much that it's actually pretty sad. I was in the 11th grade. I didn't go to class for most of the year. And so in New York, they give you these cut cards. So, like basically you cut class, and they shipped it to the mail. I think for that year, I amassed about 270 of those because I just didn't go to class. And so I remember one night I was like 17 years old or 16, whatever. And like crying in bed because I think my life is over because I failed all these, they call you friend, whatever. And little did I know, just my brain didn't work that way. My brain didn't work in a jail cell of a school, inside of a classroom. I was severely limited. My creativity was severely limited. And so for me to jump on, and all my friends, I didn't apply to college. All my friends got into top schools. I was really good in school when I attended. I had really, really high marks and all that stuff. But I found it to be utterly boring. So my friends got into all these top colleges, and I didn't. I just didn't care. I go home it's May of that year, 2009, I think. And my parents want to know which college I'm going to, and I said I'm not going. And then they said, well, if you don't go into school, you're going to have to leave. You're not going to stay in this house. And so I had no choice but to go to college. And so my sister dragged me around New York, and then got into when a private school. You had to pay out of pocket for it and all that stuff, but it was okay. And then I hated school so much. I finished it in 2 years and 9 months instead of the 4 years because I went to every class because I didn't have an option to not go. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to suffer through it. I stopped talking to everybody in my circle. I did not have any friends. I just was hyper focused on working in my family business and going to school. And that changed the trajectory of my life because that's when I started my first tech company and I was going to do my own thing. I just was not going to work in the corporate world, even though I did it for a couple of years and I validated that. But that was one. But the biggest failures came, I think, in the early stages of this company where I remember it was very hard to raise capital. And at that time, we weren't raising millions. At that time, I put in almost 6 figures of my own investment, my career savings into building the company. And we ran through it. I had an initial business partner who was supposed to carry the weight after I put the initial funds, and then he just left. He quit out of nowhere. And 6 months into it, I had the choice of just walking out. I remember at that time, March of 2018, Uber had launched Uber Health, and we were getting to raise some money. Investors backed out of the investment saying, well, Uber is going to do the same thing. And I couldn't explain to them that they're not. And so, by the way, my business is in the healthcare transportation industry. We're Uber-like for healthcare. So anyway, we were building that, and investors walked away from that. And I remember we had like 4 days of runway, 5 days of runway. And walking into our office, I'm like, man, I have to close this thing down. And that, you can't, the anxiety-ridden nights of an entrepreneur for years on end, you can't explain. And I remember having to put some more money in, going around the country, raising capital, building the company up. We scale it up, big contracts falling. I mean, endless, hurdles to build it. But the more prominent ones were the ones where you really just ran out of money. I remember there were 2 instances that I took snapshots. Our account went to about $41. And at that time, the person that was my assistant, I said, hey, take a screenshot and save it. And then, I think it was literally 9 months later, we had, 7 figures in the bank. So, and that happened multiple times where you just go all the way down. And then it's a hard feeling when you have a payroll of, insane sums and you have not a lot of money in the bank. And that's happened multiple times. And I think that state, you cannot explain the feeling of what it's like unless you actually live it and breathe it. And as entrepreneurs, I mean, hats off to everybody who makes it big and who doesn't, because it's the same journey for all of us. It's tough. But yeah, those running out of money and building a company, it's a very tough pill to swallow.
I have been there. I've looked at the amount of people I had to pay and the amount of money, and then the emptiness in my own refrigerator, and been like,
Yeah, it breaks you as a person. Yeah, and then that's when your resilience comes in. You don't want to accept failure, right? You don't want to accept it as a state of being. And you just got to do it. Like, I had no choice but to get on a plane and get in front of people. Like, I did that no matter what. When we were when we lost a major deal, I'd go fly right in front of them. And you got to do that. You cannot ever wake up and say, I don't want to wake up. You got to wake up, get on a plane, get on a train, get in a bus somewhere and get in front of the people that you need to. And you sell yourself and your vision constantly. And that's that. Every entrepreneur knows that.
Every entrepreneur knows that. But I'm glad that you are saying it because entrepreneurs listening, I get emails from people that have a baby business, like they're barely just started, to people that are in 7 and 8 figures. And I just want all of them to hear that all of you tell me the same things. It doesn't really matter if your idea of a big client is $1,000 or your idea of a big client is $10 million. The struggles that you're talking about, Sufian, are the same. The stress,
it's the same.
The money, how are we going to do this? Or when am I going to make it, quote unquote, and be okay.
Yeah. And it's so important for entrepreneurs because everybody who's running a 9-figure business had to run an 8-figure business, had to run a 7-figure, a 6-figure, a 5-figure, 4-figure. We didn't magically grow to a 9-figure business. So a lot of times people are like, well, you can't relate to it. No, these problems are prevalent at every stage. Just the magnitude of it is far worse when it's bigger.
Yes.
You owe way more money to way more people. as you scale up, and it's scary. And so you must be okay at that stage to figure it out, because if you don't, then you won't get to the next stage.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing. It's these things where it's like, well, you didn't do, you don't, another thing for me, I've seen this happen between the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, and people who do great things and change the world, and those who don't. The ones that do, becoming incredibly successful, even if it's not their fault, even if the world, everything is lined up against them, the most successful ones will always take accountability and say, you know what, I could have done better. And the vast majority of entrepreneurs who fail, because the vast majority of them do, they have excuses. Everybody has something. Like, well, you won't know what it's like because I have a child. Well, yeah, but you don't know what it's like to have this or that, or grow up with this. And it's like everybody has their own personal journey. And to have, and I think for entrepreneurs, if you put your ego to the side, that your problem is not bigger than the next entrepreneurs, you'll be very, very successful, because every single one of us has challenges that we talk about, and a lot of challenges that we never, ever, ever discuss. All of us go through our own journey. It's very difficult. And so to undermine the challenges of another, to say, well, you made it big because you had no, you didn't. I had to build this. You had to, and so I think entrepreneurs, if who want to become successful, every single time you want to blame somebody else, just look in the mirror and take accountability for it. It'll make you a great leader.
God, I wish I could just, like you said, you wanted to get on a plane. I want to get you on a plane and put you in the living rooms of every entrepreneur to say that. Just that.
Well, yeah,
because
exactly.
I think
just take accountability.
Take accountability. I've been saying this to you, dear listener, for years now. Don't listen to me then, since you're clearly not, most of you. Please listen to Sufian, because he's saying it too.
Yeah. I mean, I had to cut ties with a lot of people who just don't take accountability in my personal life, whether it's family members, whether it's friends. These are not people you want around you. You gravitate towards the lowest performing person in your circle because they make you feel better for your own ineptitude. So you get these people out of your circle. Just be around highly ambitious people. Be around people who sit there and they had nothing to do with that problem, yet say, you know what, it's my fault. And those are the people. That's it. They're the ones that are in the top 1%. They're in the top 5%. Everybody that's not there just had an excuse and dropped out.
I had another question, but I'm going to ask this one instead. How do you differentiate between accountability and shame?
Accountability and shame. I think ego is in the center of all of it, right? Like, I think our egos prevent us from accepting, accountability. Our egos prevent us from accepting the things that we are most shameful about, because we don't want to be associated with it, right? And so I think shame is something you should be okay with it so long as you grow from it, to not repeat. Accountability should be repeated all the time. Take accountability for everything. Shame, don't repeat it.
Don't repeat it.
If you know what you're saying, repeat it. Accountability, constantly repeat.
Got it. Check. So if
ego is, I think, the underlying factor.
I think that is a great way to articulate that. I think that one of the last questions, I have lots of questions, but I just looked at the time. I was like, oh no, this episode is going to be forever long. One of the last questions I have for you is about resilience and stories, and the stories we tell ourselves. What story do you tell yourself that you think contributes to you being resilient?
Yeah. So before I was born, I had a brother, and he died, and he was, he drowned, and my mom was clinically crazy for about 2 years. And, it's probably at the center of everything I do, everything I've ever done. The power of loss is real. Even if I wasn't alive for it, but the remnants of that loss impacted my life significantly. And so for me, I was on this journey since I was a young kid to make up for the loss of a brother to my mother. And that's why I could never quit. So yeah, that's been why I'm so resilient. I saw things I shouldn't have seen as a kid because I grew up in such a bad neighborhood. I never want anybody to go back to that. I really hope society doesn't have that stuff. So it makes you very resilient. You don't ever want to go and live in those areas. it's not right. So the resiliency comes from that. And then once you start doing well for yourself and for others, just not forgetting where you come from, and spreading this message and so on and so forth. But every step of the way, it just gets harder and harder, and you've got to have a war chest of resiliency. Like it just can never end. It could be never ending. And the day you stop being resilient is the day you're no longer here. Keep going.
I appreciate that motivation to move forward. Do you, my friend, as we wrap up, have any final words around the stories we tell ourselves, resiliency, anything at all? The floor is yours.
Be honest with yourself. Not everybody is capable of being an entrepreneur. Not everybody's able to live on nothing for 10 years so they could have everything 10 years later. If you want, to have everything today, then go get a high-paying job or go work somewhere and save your money and you'll be fine. But if you want to see life from a very different vantage point, you must learn to sacrifice and not see the average in life. So you must be okay to give up the good for the great all the time. And unless you don't want to do that, then there's so many options. Go freelance, go make ends meet, go marry somebody wealthy. I don't know, figure it out. But if you're going to make it yourself,
my husband's an educator. I was like, damn, I could have chosen that other option.
No, I think you did good with your husband. Yeah. Educators are good.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for you to be very honest with yourself, because you could lie to the world and the world won't know. You lie to yourself, you're going to know. So be honest with yourself, what you want out of life. And that's really going to set the stage for what you accomplish.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your time today as well. Getting vulnerable, sharing stories, really helping us reframe what it means to be a resilient entrepreneur and an entrepreneur in general. It was a refreshing and honest look. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Alea, for having me. I really appreciate you.
Well, if I had excuses before, I definitely don't have them now, because after that conversation with Sufian, none of them seem really that important. Instead of thinking of the things that I could use to stop me and having them be excuses, I plan on just using them as motivational elements in my story, allowing me to approach my own story and the version of it that I want to tell myself and others from a different perspective. What are you going to do with Sufian's information? How are you going to use the revelation of yourself as an entrepreneur to aid in your own journey? I would love to have you leave a comment on Instagram, send me a DM, send me an email, aleya@aleyaharris.com. That's ALEYA @aleyaharris.com. I want to hear from you. And above all, I would really appreciate if you could like, subscribe, and leave a rating with a comment to let me know what you think, not only of what Sufian said, but also about what we're all saying as guests and yours truly, the host of the Flourishing Entrepreneur podcast. Your feedback determines the trajectory of this podcast. We're in season 4 now. Oh my God, I know, right? And I really appreciate you rocking with me if you've been rocking with me for a minute. And I appreciate you letting me know what you want to hear in order to improve your mental, physical, and emotional health as an entrepreneur. All right. Until next time, my name is Alea Harris. This is the Flourishing Entrepreneur podcast, and I'm sending you lots of love, light, and abundance. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Flourishing Entrepreneur podcast with Alea Harris. Vibing with what you hear? Leave a 5-star review to spread the love, and be sure to click subscribe. We wish you love, light, and abundance. See you next time.